Yep, that's done it.
Welcome everyone to our Tuesday night community chat, My Self-Reliance. I'm Kelly Wilkins, your host, and it's so good to have a room full tonight. And it's lovely to see all your beautiful smiling faces. So tonight we have our special guest, Cooper Smoot, who's here to, I'm going to change my speaker view. And we're excited because I've just met Cooper recently, and he has a brand new system, I guess, for helping communities to connect. So you're going to find out all about what Cooper's up to. At the same time, I'm going to be learning about it as well. But we're all about community on this channel, and we're all about how can we create systems to help communities to get together and to flourish and grow and communicate together. And sometimes when you throw a whole bunch of people in together, it can be a real, melting pot. Even if you're good friends and you all move in close together and we're like, yes, this is going to be so much fun. We're going to be roomies. We're going to be best buddies. And then sometimes things don't always go that way. And if we don't have the right systems in place, then it can really dissolve friendships fast. Communication is key. Getting to know people is so important. And Cooper has found a way to facilitate that. So I'm going to hand over to Cooper to tell us about what you've created, and we'll jump into it. We might ask some questions as we go. You might share a screen or two with us, and share us with what have you got on?
Cool, thanks, Kelly. Yeah, it's so great to connect with this community. I resonate with so much with what you said. Like, it really is about finding new ways for communities to communicate that don't rely, especially on top-down structures that not all of us trust anymore these days. And I thought, like, the slides that I thought I'd share might be sort of a bit on my background so that you could sort of see where I've come from, and then I could tell you what we're up to. If that's cool? Yeah,
we'll get to know the Cooper and get to know what you've created. Awesome.
Yeah, so this is like a presentation that I gave recently. Basically, like, my journey has been pretty turbulent one. I went into psychology thinking I was going to study meditation, and I was really interested in trying to explore the nature of consciousness from all angles. And I followed this up with a PhD in cognitive neuroscience, and I published a few papers on the neuroscience of visual awareness with the intention of following that up with a research paradigm into meditation and altered states of consciousness. Through this process, I basically became completely disillusioned with the academic system. I found it to be nowhere near as good enough as it needs to be to deal with the vast amounts of information that we have flowing around right now. And on top of that, I burned out. So I became really depressed. I basically hit the lowest point in my life. And since that has been a gradual rebuilding process that I've building back up to a really beautiful place that I'm at now. But through that journey, I've joined a movement within science, which is called the Open Science Movement. And the basic premise is that, I might just skip forward because you probably don't need to know about all of this stuff. This is the problem with science right now. I believe that misinformation is the biggest problem that we face. I think it's why we haven't been making rapid enough progress on climate change. I think it's why we're all so confused about COVID. And like, I consider myself a researcher, and I feel like I can find information using the systems available, but I still have no idea what's going on with COVID. Like, there's so much uncertainty and bad information out there that it really just should be a lot clearer than it is right now. And if I look around, like, the reason I think this is, the main reason is that a lot of our information systems are advertising algorithms, like Google, Facebook, YouTube. They're all designed intentionally to give us whatever makes them money and not actually give us reliable information. And I feel like this is a big part of the problem why there's so many echo chambers right now. You know, like I feel like I straddle a range of different communities like science and spirituality, but the stories that I hear in these different communities are so radically different. It just points to the fact that we have these like echo chambers that are being reinforced by these bad information systems out there. And so what we're trying to do with Open Heart and Mind is to create a new information system, one that we can actually trust. It's radically transparent and it's actually reliable. So when you search for information, it gives you the information that you need, not the information that makes an advertiser money. And so if you put that in contrast to the current academic system, the current system is ridiculously closed. So basically 70% of articles that are published are put behind paywalls, which means that you need to pay some money to access them, which is usually prohibitive for most people around the world. We've also got like really high rates of false positives. So what this means is that a lot of the findings that are reported just don't replicate when you try and replicate them. And there's also a problem where those replication studies are very difficult to publish. So there's a lot of like findings out there that just aren't true, basically. And it's hard to work out what we actually know. What is ground truth right now? This is, another big problem is that there's like private corporations that are sucking the life out of academia. So publishers basically have some of the highest profit margins in the world, and have basically just kind of taken control of the academic system and are driving it towards their own profit ends. And then another problem in academia is basically evaluation, so that we're all evaluated according to the journals we publish in rather than the quality of the content. And so this is my background, like trying to figure out ways to overcome this journal system that we're all trapped in within academia. And that's what I've been working on for the last 4 years. So I started this work alongside my PhD. And then since graduating 2 years ago, I've been working exclusively on this and funding myself by playing poker, which fortunately is profitable for me. Pardon me. But basically this entire time, I've been trying to find what I think of as like the kernel of disruption. Like what is the mechanism or tool that we can build that will enable researchers and the broader world to get off these like standards of journals and move to a radically transparent open source type system? Because when you look at it, we have all of the technology that we need already to be sharing information completely transparently and getting to the bottom of information and finding out what is actually true and developing systems that like bring the experts to the forefront. But we can't get off this current academic system. And so basically, I've now come to the conclusion that academia is not the right place to develop these ideas. So I've been developing a model for the last 4 years, and as much as I was trying to get it going in academia, I basically just found out that I'm just going to stop sharing. Oh, I think I just stopped recording accidentally. Is it recording still?
Yeah, you're good.
Okay, cool. Sorry. And so I've basically come to the conclusion that academia is not at all the right place to test these ideas. As much as I get support from my colleagues in the open science space, at the end of the day, everyone's so time pressed, time poor, they don't have capacity to experiment, ironically. And so what I'm doing now with these same ideas is taking them out of the academic context and testing them out in the context of a festival. So the beautiful thing about a festival, I can keep showing slides. I just felt like the rest is all very wordy and I can probably just talk through it.
That's so good.
Let me just see if, I think I've closed it now. Yeah, I'll just stop. I'll just keep chatting. And so, what we're doing now is basically running this brand new festival. It's called Open Heart and Mind. And it is the first goal of it is born out of my own experience. Like I said before, like I straddle different communities and I hear different stories and different perceptions about science and different perceptions about the government and different perceptions about information generally. And to me, that just points to this lack of communication between these communities. Like at the end of the day, we're all humans, and we all can connect if we, get face to face and have conversations. And the more that we can do that, the more we can realize that we're not the enemy. The bad information and these bad systems are the enemy. And so the first goal is to get people in the first place and just communicating in a, honest and supportive way. But then the background goal is to prototype this new information system. And so that's what we're doing with this festival. It's basically it's a gift-based festival that's inspired by Burning Man. And the way it works is that people can offer anything that they want to the community across the themes of interest. So these are music, art, science, well-being, volunteering, culture, and money. And then all of those offerings get transparently reviewed by the community, and we collectively decide what it is that we want to co-create at the event. And so then we have the event, and afterwards we go through a secondary review process, which is, you can think of it like expressing gratitude for those contributions that you found really valuable. And so you have an opportunity then to say thank you to those people who contributed out of the goodness of their hearts. And so through this process, we have an opportunity with all of these review processes to test these ideas about how do you develop a model where the community gets to validate information. So there's no one person, there's no Facebook telling you what is good information. There's no one censoring the information. It's up to the community to decide and determine what we believe is reliable. And then so using this process, we can allow the reliable information to bubble to the surface and then start to trust that more.
Now, you've started with a group and shared this festival idea, and you've got a little community who are working together to put on the first festival. Is that right, Cooper?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
And so how far have you got in that process? Where are we up to?
So we did a pilot test last year in November, which was the first example of this, and we had 100 people come along to that event. It was really beautiful and joyous, and everybody just co-created out of the goodness of their hearts. But that then has evolved into doing this thing for real. And we actually were planning to do the festival at the end of March. And we're gearing up towards that. But unfortunately, obviously, with all the flooding, the site had to cancel on us. And so we decided to push back to spring so that we can really do this properly. And so we're still planning to host this festival in October. But in the meantime, we've decided that we want to do a tour to try and connect with communities, especially like out in Central Australia. We really want to connect with Indigenous communities and get feedback and try and learn what we should be building for people, because we want to build something that is for everybody, all Australians, everyone around the world, really, and not just me and my biased network of friends.
Where would you like to hold your first festival?
Well, so we're doing small events, like day events, over the next 3 months. And so those will be in this big loop around Australia. And actually, I could probably share screen again, because that's what this map was. So this is going to take 3 months to do. And so we're starting here in Brisbane. I'm going to go first south along the coast, and then through New South Wales, South Australia, Central Australia, and then we head up to Cairns and head back down. And basically every week along this route, we're going to drive a little bit. We're going to connect with communities, and we're going to connect with like land care change makers, and hopefully, some people in your community would like to connect with us. And then every weekend we have the opportunity to throw one of these small day events where we'll be offering meditation and music and art and science talks and talks on culture as well. And the idea is not that we're just bringing everything. The idea is to, co-create with communities that we link up with along the way. So we'll bring a bus and a stage, but the idea will be for everybody in the community to come along and see if we can co-create something together.
And your name is Om. Tell us about the name.
Yeah, so the name was a beautiful example of co-creation with the community. So my first version of the name was like Open Confest, because it was kind of like merging of an open science conference with Confest. And yeah, the feedback I got from that was not good, not a good name for a festival. And so we moved to the idea of Heart and Mind, which is really about, connecting spirituality and wisdom and knowledge together in the same space. And so we were rolling with that idea for a bit, but I realized actually there's a Heart and Mind festival in America, and I didn't want to compete with them when we go international. And at the same time, I felt like the word open should be there, because that's a nod not only to openness of heart and mind, but also the open science movement, which this is all based on. And so then a friend suggested that Open Heart and Mind, the acronym for that is OHM, which is so perfect, because Om is obviously the eternal sound of the universe. But in the scientific world, it also is for Om's law, which is about conservation and transformation of energy. And that's really what the project is about. So it feels like a perfectly aligned name that, our community came up with.
Yeah, that's awesome. That synchronicity of that alignment it sends you tingles, doesn't it? Sometimes when that comes together.
It did.
And then when does your tour dates kick off? Because I know you've got 3 months to do this, and it's all happening, isn't it?
It's happening very rapidly. Yeah. So this whole project it's a experiment in progress. So there's a lot of flying by the seat of our pants. But the first, we're having a departure party in Brisbane on the 25th of June. So that's less than 3 weeks now. And then basically we'll spend the next 3 months traveling around doing these little daytime events. And then the end of the festival will be in October, the beginning of October, back in Southeast Queensland region.
And how are you letting the word out that where you'll be and when, so that people can connect with you or watch your journey, or what? Yeah, tell us about how people can kind of, reach out to you, connect. What's the plan?
Yeah, so the first way is through our Facebook group. So it's called Open Heart and Mind, and I'm guessing we can share the links later. But that's the sort of the public interface, I guess, for the project. That's where people could connect and sort of see what's going on, and we make posts about what's going on and little updates so that people can stay connected. Since starting this page at the beginning of this year, we've now got like 600 and something people in there, and it's really rapidly growing. So there's a lot of interest for this, which is very, very exciting. But that's really Facebook is kind of it's sort of the public interface, but we're in the background. We have then a couple of platforms that we can onboard you on if people are more interested in getting more involved. And that's actually where we're prototyping this system. So we're using the same system to organize the community, the festival, and everything, all in the same space. And so, I guess Facebook is kind of the main way, but this is really connecting with your community is really beautiful, because I would love to hear from anyone out there who has a bit of property and wouldn't mind a bus turning up and potentially throwing a party if you want, but also just connecting and finding out about what you're up to.
Yeah. And so you said that you carry your own stage. How are you moving that about? And what kind of, when you set up, what kind of space are you setting up in? And yeah.
Yeah, so we've just bought a tiny home bus, which we're calling Omnibus. And we're going to pull a trailer. So basically we haven't got it yet, but we will get a stretch tent, and basically the bus is going to convert into a stage. So we've got a rooftop deck, and so we're going to set up the stage so that you've basically got this full stage set up. And so we're currently only 2-wheel drive, so that is a caveat. We can't really get to super rugged places. That's on the to-do list to get the 4-wheel drive upgrade. But yeah, basically we'll bring all the equipment and create the space.
Lovely. So if anyone wants to get involved, and they had some space or land that they could say, hey, let's bring you over here, and you could set that up. So tell me, like, let's fast forward a little bit, and you've done your tour and you've met up with lots of communities on the way. What's your goal from that? Like, how would you know that your outcome is being successful? How do you?
Yeah, great question. So what we're building is, in the first instance, is a replicable template for anyone to do exactly what we're doing. So the way that our system is working is it's fully replicable. So basically anyone could download our code, they could download the app, and they could duplicate what we've done to create this festival and replicate it anywhere in the world. So we're creating a kind of like a template for running your own festival, basically. And so what we're looking for are people that are community leaders and have a community that could benefit from this type of decentralized way to organize and would be interested in adopting the system that we're using for whatever use case they already have, And it could be a festival, but it could be a conference, it could be a community meetup. It could be a community dinner. We're already sort of prototyping this as a model. It could be a not-for-profit, because what we're creating is really just a general template that any community can use to track and recognize the value that people contribute, so that they get fair attribution, fair recognition for the value that they put into the community. And by doing so, we then empower those leaders to take charge and really like steer and become custodians for the community.
Well, and just to really demonstrate the difference in the model that most people are experiencing at the moment, as a participant in a festival, you would go along and you would think, wow, this is really great, but you don't necessarily get to see the back end of that. And I know I've been a part of event, creating for a long, long time. And it usually comes down to a core couple of people who's doing everything. And it's a very tiring, it's very onerous, it's a lot of hard work, a lot of time and effort goes into creating a festival or any kind of event. And then those who get something out of it have usually paid to put into it, right? There's lots of like stall holders here and people who are paying money to make this thing run. And at the end of the day, there might be a few who come out of the festival who are maybe have made some money out of it, maybe stall holders who have maybe made money, maybe if they've lost money, whatever. But it's all fairly well stacked in a few people's favor. and then depending on crowd participation to make that festival really work. Whereas what you're talking about is it's a massive collaboration between all parties, and there's not a whole lot of money exchange, well, none. It's all gift exchange. So there's effort based, but the rewards are so much greater because there's so much more love that's gone into it and so much more heart that's gone into actually setting a festival up in this way. And so this is why you need a model, because most people who suggest, hey, let's put on a festival, is okay, well, where's the money going to come from to do this kind of thing? Or where's the energy going to come from to do this kind of thing? And so what Cooper's created is something that if it's a downloadable model that anyone can use, that's really very valuable for community. It's really very valuable for groups of people to get together and disseminate information and collaborate together and create the system for that communication where everyone gets equally recognized, everyone is equally feeling validated and acknowledged for their participation. And in this way, you've created a massive cohesiveness with that community, whereas oftentimes it doesn't always end up looking that way. Would you say that, Cooper? Have I described it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I'm very relatively new to organizing festivals, but I've talked a lot with festival organizers over the last couple of years. And like you always hear the same problems, you know. There's unfair recognition of work. There's people who drop off the radar, you know, like volunteers might not turn up, and then somebody else has to do the work, and then they end up burning out and then leaving the organization. And that's not great for the organization or the community, because now you've just lost a whole bunch of skills that you have to retrain someone. And so it's actually really inefficient to operate in this like sort of more traditional top-down manner like most organizations do, because bosses only see so much of what's going on the ground. They're not always the best at actually fairly recognizing reward. We know that communities and crowds are really good, really good at recognizing relative value, particularly when you average across a diverse range of people. But then the flip side is that you've got kind of, bottom-up processes that a lot of sort of, you know, grassroots communities operate by. But then you have another type of problem, which is they don't often have the clarity and leadership that you get with a top-down structure. And so what we're creating, I believe, is a blend or a balance between like a top-down and a bottom-up structure, in that like what we do is track absolutely everything, like to a fanatic degree, that someone does towards the project. And then everything is evaluated and reviewed and given recognition over time. And what this means then is that you have a track record of everything that everyone has done and all of the things that the community found valuable. And so then over time, if you're consistently putting in value in a particular sector or across the project, then that basically shows the community that you're a leader, and it gives you more control, more sway, like you really deserve, because you do actually know more about the project and you are actually producing value. So compared to someone who's just turned up or even, you know, might be antagonistic towards the project, you do deserve more of a say in how the thing should be organized. I think I went off topic there. I think you were talking. Did that respond to your question?
Yeah. No, that's right. Because, you know, to really understand the value of what you're doing, then you also have to understand how things are currently done and the problems that we run into. And like you say, that top-down approach or the grassroots approach. And I have been in organizations where, that collaboration, where there's no necessarily one person that's doing everything. And that works beautifully, and it works over time. And I think that's the key, is that if you've got people who are bringing their skill set and working in partnership with others, then that's longevity. You know, you've got something that's sustainable and that people can keep coming back to time and time again. And that's what makes it really successful, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other thing that you do, or I believe we will be doing and are doing, is providing pathways for people to get involved. So like if you can see absolutely everything that this person did in this role over 2 years, and you're maybe interested in getting involved, but you don't really, you're not quite confident enough to get involved. Like currently, with an opaque system, it's really difficult for that person to actually step up and go, yeah, I'd like to try some of this stuff, because it's a black box, and you never find out what are the stuff that people do to complete this role. Whereas we have this transparent record of all of the things that someone did, and you also have a recognized leader who could become a mentor for that person. So now that person can step into that role and start checking off some of these tasks. And then when they've got problems, they just go to the mentor and they find out, oh, okay, that's what that means. And, they get the teaching and the learning that they need to empower themselves and step into the role that they want to.
Lovely. Now, Jane has a question, and I guess this is an interesting question because you talked about funding yourself through your skills with, I was going to say poker, yeah, which I think is fabulous. If you can be that consistently successful in poker, that's awesome. So how are you actually funding to send the bus around Australia?
This is off the back of my poker winnings. Like since graduating, I've had a pretty good couple of years at poker. I also had a bit of a win with some cryptos. So basically, I'm bankrolling this project right now. But at the same time, in the process of bankrolling it, I'm demonstrating viable funding models. So there's two potential pathways there's at least 3 or 4. The 2 that we're testing right now are funding. So there's a lot of funders out there that really want to solve this problem. And I know because in academia, it's the money is there, but the funding mechanisms in academia are as broken as the rest of academia. Like, it's incredibly inefficient the way that money's allocated. There's very little accountability once the money is actually given out. But we're demonstrating a transparent way to keep track of where the money's going and whether it's actually being spent well according to the community. So I think that's going to be a funding avenue. Another avenue is investment. So some of my money has gone to purchase assets like the bus, but in the future we'll also be getting, there'll be other assets like the data that we produce, because data is incredibly valuable. I think everyone is starting to realize how valuable data is, because the new kings of the world are the data companies. But imagine if we were in control of our own data. Like, imagine how valuable that would be, especially if we have a really, really reliable system for working out what's actually going on and generating reliable information. Because I really believe, this is fact, the research is incredibly valuable to society. It's just that the value doesn't tend to get captured with the researchers. It tends to get capitalized on by whatever pharmaceutical companies or whatever leverage the research to their own ends. And so if we were actually to start to retain control of our data, but then leverage it to, least to society, we could start to sell the outputs of our data to pharmaceutical companies. We could start to sell them to governments, to universities, basically you name it. And so that data and all of the assets that we hold is another funding mechanism, because that's valuable and can generate interest and revenue for the project, which then feeds back to all of those people who have been proven over time to be contributing value.
Well, it's interesting what you say there, Cooper, because recently a lot of us have been left feeling like data is the enemy and we don't want anything to do with data or having our data captured. But of course, that what you say is true, is that data is absolutely powerful in the right hands. And if we are not utilizing that information to our best advantage, then we're just letting that smart technology just go to all the wrong people. Why aren't we using it back in a way that benefits us? It doesn't have to be our enemy. It can be our friend if we utilize it in the right way. So interesting that you have created that, and you've got all kinds of systems for that. Does anyone listening in want to jump in with a question, or we might have a little bit of open mic time if anyone wants to have a bit of Q&A. Just letting you all have a think about it and giving you a moment to come off mute. You've actually kind of got a section of the conversation that nobody has really approached before, is that it's kind of like, rather than having a them and us scenario, there's this well, the elites have created this lots of smart technology, but rather than kick out the technology, let's use it. Let's make it work for us. And you're just at the tippy point of making sure that the processes of community work with your technology, right? And so that's why the trip around Australia is to work with communities and to connect and to teach. It's kind of all encapsulating, isn't it? It's a very big project that you're taking on.
Yeah, it's insanely big. It keeps growing by the day. But yeah, you're spot on. Like, I personally don't believe technology is good or evil. I just think it's a tool, and it's like any tool, like a hammer. It depends how you use it. You can build a house or you can kill someone. And so really, like, the tools, I think, is we need to be reclaiming control of the tools from the powers that be, because I don't believe data is bad. I think our data in other people's hands is bad. Like, that's the problem, because then they can exploit us effectively. But if we're in control of our data, we can decide how it gets used. And I imagine a world, and we're working towards a system where I will be fully in control of my data, and I will be able to decide who gets to use it, including which companies. Like, I could say Facebook doesn't get to use my data, Google doesn't get to use my data, but this network that I agree with and this not-for-profit that I like gets to use my data. And then if I find that any of those are actually abusing that trust that I have given them, then I can rescind my rights. And if I decide that I don't even like this system at all and I want to take my data, then I can also just take it with me and exit the system completely. And that sort of reality is actually not far around the corner. Like, we are on the verge of Web 3.0 technologies, which will give people that level of control if we can find the right system that empowers them to be in control. And so that's the system that we're working towards, where you could decide when, where, and how your data gets used, and be fully in control of it.
Yeah, that's super powerful. I've never heard anyone say that before. Any thoughts, guys? Anyone want to jump off mute and add your question?
Yeah, I want to say, I don't know how you can retrieve your data once it's gone out there anyway. That's one thing. But I want to know more. I want to know, more about it. Because it sounds very idealistic to me. I was born in the 60s. I wasn't really, hanging out in the 60s, but it sounds a lot like a lot of 60s stuff, a lot of peace, love, and mung beans, and, we just all come together and it all works. But my experience is, and this is what attracted me to tonight, is that there's, at the moment, particularly, we don't know how to be with other people who are different. Or it's almost intolerable that other people might be so different to us. And that's, I suppose, where I was coming from when I came along tonight, because I'm already in a group where I was saying to Kelly, I'd like to get some sort of a whiteboard and do, circles and subsets and all this sort of stuff, because I'm in a group and we're not all the same, of course, but you can kind of narrow down the core values or the core, the reasons, the most common reasons we're in that group. And that is kind of our unifying bond, if you like. And those other things, once you prioritize things around a bit, then people can say, oh, no, I don't want to be part of that, or I do, I don't know if that's on the same wavelength as you, Cooper. It might be probably a bit lower than what you're talking about, but I think that there does need to be a structure and a template. So I'm really curious to see what you have in mind.
Yeah, and I mean, you hit the nail on the head. Like, circling, I think you mentioned as a practice, right? Like, that's a really beautiful practice that gives everybody an equal opportunity to speak and have their say. And as much as that works in a personal context, and I really do feel like what we're building is to empower people in a personal face-to-face context, it can also inform the way you do, online interactions as well. So like in our Zoom meetings, we always make sure that everybody has an opportunity to introduce themselves. And we try to check in whenever we can that everybody has an opportunity to, say any objections or raise anything that they want to raise. And so really we're just talking about systems of, ways for people to interact. And what our system is trying to do is just capture those in a set, like a protocol, or a sort of like set of rules or guidelines about how we operate, so that we can try and, I guess, capture all of that ancient wisdom, because, circling is an ancient practice that so many cultures use, and there's a lot of good reasons why they use it. So we should learn from that. And
I actually don't know what that is, circling. I was just talking about, quite a literal 2-dimension whiteboard with circles on it. And, this is one person and we overlap in this subset. And, it was kind of just a diagrammatical kind of way of seeing how people have things in common, but also not have things in common. And so in a group, the overlap is our things in common. So,
and I think that's part of the healing process is, we feel fractured. And so when we find someone else with something in common, then we go, okay, good, I'm not the only one. And we validate ourselves as we find people that we can connect with. But this is probably moving on from that kind of fear-based into, all right, I'm now able to grow again and expand, and how am I going to do that sustainably? So
it's not really fear-based. It's just that I'm in a freedom group and we're on about something in particular, but we're coming from a lot of different places.
Well, then maybe
it's not a fear thing. It's oh my goodness, all these people from such a diverse background, and yet we've got things in common, things not in common, of course, and then how to work with that. So I was curious just to see what kind of template or whatever you would apply to that. You know what I mean? It's not a fear. It's just the facts,
Yeah. So like I could sort of try and I could have
we don't have to do it now. If you want to send me something, I don't mind.
No, I'd love to respond, because like what you said there is like you've all got a common agenda, but you're very, from different backgrounds and quite diverse. And like that's a real strength, like having a diversity of opinions is actually like a really powerful way to get at a more accurate picture of what's going on. And there's plenty of research to back that up. But it also just makes sense, hear all of the angles and then make an informed decision from it. And so like that is one of our principles, is maximizing diversity, and even like diversity of opinion, like having people with wildly different ideas is actually really beneficial in the community, because you can question yourself. You can constantly check in. Have I actually considered all of the, full range of possibilities? And so that's not like antagonistic to the idea that you would have a shared mission. And that shared mission is what binds you together as a community, because you're all working towards some purpose. And so what we're doing with our project, and any community could do when they adopt our technology and our processes, is just clearly describe what are your objectives. Like our documentation is all fully open source. Everybody can read it. Everybody can edit it. They can contribute. They can jump in and just start typing new lines it's like a wiki kind of thing. And so you could have a wiki for your community that says, this is what we're about, and this is what we're trying to achieve. And then every time someone does an action, the community checks in and says, does this action actually advance this mission? And if it does, then they get a little bit of recognition. They get a token that says, thank you for, contributing to our mission.
Yeah.
And that thank you comes from the community, basically. And so
I guess the work there is working out the common mission.
For sure, yeah. But
that's
that can also
work. Yeah.
It is, but that's great work, because then you actually get on the same page.
Yeah.
And it's collaborative. You know, you can go through that process of figuring out your mission together. And what a more powerful way to figure out that you are actually all aligned, or maybe there's actually two groups here and you realize, hang on, we want different things, and that's fine. Go and do your separate things. You don't need to compete, because everybody, you know, we're all just working towards what we think is going to make the world a better place.
Cooper, can you respond to Andrew's chat? It's a long one, so I can't see it all in one go.
Yeah, so please clarify if I understand correctly. You set up festivals, and in the process draw in people who want to be a part of it, and so establish leaders in the towns you set up the festival. Yes. These leaders then become part of a system that collects data for use for the good of the community and financial systems and leadership. Yeah, I'd say broadly speaking, like the degree that people would get engaged with what we're doing is completely up to them. You know, we're just going to keep doing this basically. And if people find it valuable, then great, please find it valuable and go and use it. And if people like find the technology valuable, but don't like our philosophy and our principles that we've laid out, that's cool. Take the technology and go create your own principles. So in terms of the festival, I guess our goal there is to really like use it as a creative, playful space where we can explore these really complex, difficult ideas about how do you share, you know, potentially controversial ideas with one another, and do so in a respectful, loving and trustful way. And yeah, through that process, we will identify a number of people who are continually putting value into this project. And this, it's really beautiful to see this engine already starting to work, because people are stepping up in our community and are taking like control of little bits or taking charge of little bits and yeah, becoming leaders, I guess, in this thing that we're building. I think I answered the question.
And then Atta asked a question about Web3 is a blockchain technology. Are you working on storing data on the blockchain technology?
Yes. Yeah. And actually, this was a thread that Jane brought up. The first part of her question before is how can you even get data back when you put it out there? And so this is where blockchain comes into the fore. So I think, Jane, you mentioned that, you know, like it sounds like a bunch of hippy dippy stuff from the 60s. Well, what we didn't have in the 60s was these really amazing technologies. Firstly, we didn't have the internet. So we didn't have the capacity to even do what we're doing right now and communicate with anyone in the world instantly. But the next level of development that we didn't have is these blockchain technologies. And what these enable are, you can encrypt your data. So when you put your data out there, sure, your data is stored in the world and it's stored on this matrix, this network of computers around the world, but you're the only person that holds the encryption key. And the way this works is like data's, I've never really tried to, anyway, like your data might look like this, but when it's stored on the network, it looks like a completely different thing. And the only way, it's a one directional thing as well. So the only way that you can actually understand what this actually says is if you've got that key, and the key is like 32 digits long or something, and like impossible to crack until we get maybe like quantum computing, but then there'll be quantum encryption. So yeah, basically like there are ways, and there are now really exciting technologies that enable this and enable any project to like evolve really rapidly, which is why actually I have a lot of hope for the future, because like the thing when you look through history is you don't see disruption coming. It's like, it's not a slow burning thing. When the internet came, it was just like, whoa, the internet's here. And then, whoa, now like we're buying pet food online and stuff. Like it's a real step change in society. And if I look at technologies throughout history, the new brand of Web3 technologies and blockchain are like, I think they're the greatest invention ever, maybe. But yeah, they're going to change the face of the world. And I believe there will be ways that your data will be safe and you'll be in control of it.
Well, I've never heard anyone be so positive about the technology of the future. I have a 12-year-old who I'm so dead set scared of meeting the metaverse. But the way you describe it, maybe there's hope for him after all. So
I'm sure there is.
So, and Emma said, Cooper, this community charter, for want of a better word, which is open source, is it open source only within your community? Yeah, tell us. I don't know. You know more about that, what that is?
Yeah, so I can type it in now, but yeah, no, it's openly available. So didn't put the HTTP in front, so that might not work, but that's the short link to our open source documentation. And so you can jump on there right now and you can have a look. If you want to edit it, you will have to register with our platform, which is it's called ClickUp right now. That's what we're using, which is, it's just a project management suite basically. But in registering, we'll put you through a little bit of an onboarding process just so that you are aware of what we're doing, and we can check consent, and we can check that you're comfortable with, the processes that we're using, which is radical transparency, radical honesty. But then you would be free to edit away and do whatever you want with it. And the reason that we can be comfortable doing that is that there's a technology that's been around for quite a while now called Git. And what this is basically, if you've ever used version like Google Docs, and you've noticed that there's like a version control, you can go back to old versions and be like, oh, that's what changed, and blah, blah, blah. It's the same technology that we have on this platform. And so if you were to go in and, as someone said to me recently, like delete everything and then go lols, whatever, lols forever, then that would be a change that's tracked, and we can just undo that, but we can also evaluate that as a community and decide that that was actually not a very good change, and actually that was antagonistic, and we're going to take away your tokens because you've cost the community now, and so forth. Or conversely, obviously what we want people to do is add value. And so now if we see a change that's actually valuable, the community says, thank you, that was great. Like, that really was an improvement. And so here's some tokens on behalf of the community.
That's really, that's, yeah, mind-blowing. That's like got it a little bit more clear and a bit exciting. So can you put in your Facebook links?
Yes, absolutely. And I'll also put in my email there, because that's probably the most direct way to get in touch with me. And yeah, very happy to chat with anyone that's interested in connecting or learning more. So that's my email there.
Yeah, I'd love to. We're actually going to wrap up tonight. For anyone who's watching this on the replay, you're going to miss out on the awesome conversations that happen once we press stop record. It always happens. You got to be in the room to have the awesome conversations. But I do want to thank you so much, Cooper, for coming along tonight and sharing with us your vision and creating the future in a whole new light for me. I think there was just a whole lot about the digital world. I'm just watching way too many movies to think that anything is useful is happening in the future. But
it's not all going to be Starlink, don't worry. Or Skylink. That's what I was thinking.
Yeah. So yeah, it's been awesome to have you on, and thank you so much for your open heart and mind community.
Well, thank you, Kelly. And yeah, thank you for inviting me and the opportunity to connect with the community. So it's been great, and I look forward to more. Thank you, everyone.
Lovely. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.